Let me take you back to 2 years ago when my life started crumbling. At that time, my daughter was just 3 years old. My work schedule was so hectic that I hardly spent any time with her, so every moment I did get was really special. She was at that age when kids started saying meaningful words, and I treasured those moments. My wife was a stay-at-home mom, handling most of the parenting duties, while I was grinding 6 days a week at a job I had just been promoted to. A job that, honestly, I wasn't fully qualified for, but paid well. On top of that, we were expecting another baby. Since my daughter began talking, it has been a joy to be around her. She started speaking a bit later than other kids her age, but once she started, she wouldn't stop, and I loved it. Hearing her talk reminded me why I worked so hard every day to provide for my family. One Sunday evening, we were doing my favorite thing, hanging out and watching a movie together with our 6-year-old pit bull. I loved when she commented on what she saw on TV, like naming my grandma's cat if there was a cat on screen, or calling out our dog's name when a dog appeared. Most PG-13 movies have some romantic scenes, and I avoid R-rated ones with her, but it's hard to find movies without any romance these days. We were watching Wonder Woman 1984, which is family-friendly and something I can enjoy with my daughter. Plus, it has a female superhero, which I hoped would empower her as she grew up. Then came the part in the movie where Gal Gadot, playing Wonder Woman, had a romantic scene with Chris Pine. That's when things got weird. During that scene, my daughter said, "That's Mama and Udo." She called her mother Mama and me Dada, but who was Udo? At first, I thought she had misspoken. We have family members who visit often, but I'd never heard her call anyone Udo. I had no idea who Udo could be. I pondered her words for a few minutes, then decided to rewind the scene to see if she'd say Udo again. Sure enough, she did. I looked into her innocent eyes and softly asked, "Who is Udo?" She pointed to the ceiling, which didn't make any sense to me. I thought maybe she was pointing to God or something. To test it further, I played another movie with a romantic scene. To my surprise, my daughter said the same thing. It made me wonder if she was trying to tell me something, but I had no idea what it could be. Who is Udo? Became the biggest mystery for me at that time. Some people argue that you can't trust what children say, and I would usually agree. However, around that time, I read a news story about a 3-year-old who remembered their past life and even identified their murderer. Children can sometimes have a special wisdom, especially at that age. Although my situation was different because it was happening in the present, the similarities in age and the story's impact made me believe that children could be like little oracles. It was surreal, and the biggest mystery for me was figuring out who Udo was. I couldn't possibly ask my wife about Udo because she might lie to me. Back then, I had complete trust in my wife and expected nothing but honesty from her. My wife was born in the Middle East and came to America with her family as a teenager. She was raised as a Muslim. My parents also migrated from the same country, but I was born here in the US. We were introduced through family connections, so our marriage had strong family support. We both identified as Muslims, but weren't extremely religious. We observed Islamic traditions and festivities, and sometimes attended the mosque on Fridays. Occasionally, my wife wore a hijab, but it was her choice, and I didn't mind either way. She's 26 years old and I'm 32. She was studying psychology in college, and before we started a family, she worked as a high school teacher. We decided together that she would become a stay-at-home mom and take care of the children. I worked as a financial manager and was relatively young for such a position at a big bank. We moved into our current apartment about 7 months ago because I received a promotion and had to relocate, which came with a significant pay increase of over $40K. That night, after putting my baby to sleep, I still pondered who Udo could be. I never thought about confronting my wife because accusing her of something so serious without any evidence would be foolish. Besides, my wife was an amazing partner in every way. She was obedient, took care of household chores, cooked delicious meals, and we had a healthy sex life. There were no red flags whatsoever, so why would I accuse her of having an affair just because my daughter mentioned Mama and Udo in a movie scene? It seemed far-fetched. I didn't know who Udo was, and it could very well be just a figment of my daughter's imagination. Accusing someone without solid proof is a serious matter, and once spoken, it can't be taken back. My next step was to find out who Udo was, even though the thought of my wife having an affair with Udo tormented me. I completely forgot about it the next day and carried on with my usual routine. Fast forward 2 months. It had been 9 months since we moved to our new apartment. One day, we were walking our dog at a community park near our place. It was me, my daughter, my wife, and our dog. Suddenly, we crossed paths with a man who was also walking his dog. The interesting thing was that my dog seemed to recognize his dog right away. Both dogs acted like they knew each other, and my dog started running toward the stranger and his dog. I quickly pulled on the leash to stop my dog. I glanced at my wife, and she was trying her best to ignore what was happening, avoiding eye contact and looking straight ahead. When my daughter saw the man, she called out, "Budo! Budo!" She called him with the same familiarity she would use for any of my relatives she knew. But the man reacted differently. It was as if he didn't know her at all. He ignored us and continued walking, dragging his dog away and acting like a stranger. I made eye contact with the man, politely smiled at him, and he smiled back before continuing on his way. It was such a strange experience that left me needing an explanation. There was an awkward energy surrounding us. Even though the encounter with this stranger lasted only a few seconds, it felt much longer. I looked at my wife again, and she was still looking straight ahead as if she hadn't noticed what had just happened. I asked her who the man was and if we knew him. She responded dismissively, saying he was just an upstairs neighbor, as if she barely knew him. I questioned how our daughter knew his name if he was just an upstairs neighbor. My wife explained that the man had a habit of letting his dog off the leash, and his dog would come looking for our dog. They had interacted several times, and he would greet our daughter. It seemed like a reasonable explanation, right? But there was one thing that bothered me. Remember 2 months ago when my daughter saw a romantic scene in a movie and called out, "Mama and Udo"? That same Udo is the person my daughter just called out to, who turned out to be our neighbor. Coincidence? I don't think so. When I asked my daughter who Udo was back then, she pointed to the ceiling. Strange, isn't it? Now my wife had confirmed that Udo was indeed an upstairs neighbor. This couldn't be just a coincidence. Something was going on here, and I was determined to find out what it was. My wife was acting oddly and being secretive. I never thought she would lie to me, and I hadn't caught her in a lie before, but there was a suspicious feeling in the air. We walked in silence for the rest of our walk. After the encounter with Udo, I started thinking about all the what-ifs and how my life would be turned upside down if my wife was having an affair. The idea of my wife being close to another man disgusted me. Even though the evidence was only circumstantial, I felt repulsed by the thought. Before we reached our apartment, my wife noticed my awkwardness and asked me what was going on. I simply replied with, "Nothing," and remained silent, lost in my thoughts. When we got home, I abruptly asked my wife the name of the man we encountered. She seemed upset and claimed she didn't know. The sudden question surprised her, and I could tell she sensed that I suspected something. But it wasn't the right time to confront her. I was determined to gather evidence. That's all I could think about the next day. Where there's smoke, there's fire, right? I went online in search of answers. I found forums where I could share my story and document it so I wouldn't keep it all bottled up inside. Plus, I hoped to find support and maybe someone who had gone through a similar situation and knew how to find out if my wife was having an affair with Udo. Perhaps someone would tell me I was just being paranoid and risking my marriage for no reason. The first thing I needed to find out was the real name of the guy. If his name wasn't Udo, maybe Udo was just his dog's name. In that case, my suspicion would fall apart because Mama can't be romantically involved with a dog. I also realized that I shouldn't take my daughter's words too seriously. The private investigator asked if I wanted him to continue, and I decided to retain his services for 2 more weeks to see if he could uncover any further information. Honestly, I wasn't sure what else I wanted him to find out. There was no way he would catch my wife and Hugo publicly displaying affection unless it was happening in our apartment or his. But I was encouraged by the initial debriefing and wanted to dig deeper. During the debriefing the following week, the private investigator observed that Hugo seemed to be involved with multiple women. He witnessed him going out with 3 different women, 2 of whom were his employees, which is a violation in most companies. However, the investigator didn't discover anything new about my wife, apart from the fact that she hung out with Hugo at the park along with our daughter. In the 3rd week, I asked the investigator to look into the women Hugo was having affairs with and find out if they were married. He found that one of them was married with children, while the marital status of the other woman was single. He couldn't gather any information about the 3rd woman. At this point, I started thinking that Hugo was a terrible person. He was sleeping with other people's wives and abusing his authority at work. Moreover, it was highly likely that he was also involved with my wife. I needed more evidence to confirm if Hugo was having a relationship with my wife. I already had proof of my wife lying, but I wanted to know if she was putting my health at risk and potentially jeopardizing the paternity of our child. The investigator provided me with a hidden camera to install in our house, including our bedroom, along with instructions on how to monitor it remotely. In the 1st week, I didn't see anything suspicious, no signs of Hugo coming to my apartment. The 2nd week yielded the same result. I started considering giving up on the surveillance before my wife discovered the camera. She cleaned the entire house every day, making it difficult to maintain its hidden position. I could confront her based on the evidence I already had and file for a divorce citing her emotional affair as the reason. However, the evidence of infidelity was weak since I only had proof of her lying to me. I could mention what our daughter said, but my wife would deny it, and I didn't want to strain their relationship. They might have been engaging in their activities at Hugo's apartment, where I wouldn't be able to capture any evidence. There was no way the private investigator could just camp out on the stairs of our apartment building watching my front door all day. I was ready to throw in the towel, but I couldn't give up now. I decided to give it 1 more week, and boy did it pay off. It was a roller coaster of emotions as I watched the evidence unfold. I felt a wave of sadness and humiliation, but also a sense of relief that this agonizing 4-month ordeal was finally coming to an end. It had been a whole 11 months since we moved into this apartment. My daughter turned out to be right all along. She had told me about it 4 months ago, and now I finally caught my wife in the act. Let me share what I witnessed on camera. After I left for work, my wife took our daughter out for a walk with the dog. When they returned, they were accompanied by Hugo. He entered my apartment together with the dogs. Hugo followed behind my wife, and my daughter was in front of her. Then I saw Hugo come up from behind and embrace my wife, caressing her and kissing her neck. She turned around, and they began passionately kissing each other. The only thing keeping them apart was her 6-month pregnancy, which could potentially be mine or Hugo's. This conclusive evidence gave me the confidence to confront her. Their encounter didn't escalate beyond kissing and touching. Eventually they separated, and he left. It deeply hurt me to see how she repaid my love and commitment. I treated her with respect, never laid a hand on her in anger, and provided for all her needs. Yet she couldn't remain faithful or give me the loyalty I deserved. Her actions endangered my life by engaging in an affair with a man who had multiple partners, putting me at risk of life-threatening STDs. She betrayed the sole provider for our family. She behaved like a dog and should face the consequences of her actions. It was time to have a serious conversation with her. When I arrived home, I confronted my wife about her relationship with Hugo. She initially denied knowing what I was talking about and acted oblivious. However, the fear in her eyes revealed the truth she was hiding deep inside. Her secret was no longer concealed. I presented her with the pictures of her and Hugo together in the park. It was at that moment she finally admitted to knowing him, but she didn't want me to find out because she feared I would suspect something was going on between them. She kept lying, insisting that they were just talking and nothing inappropriate had occurred. That's when I revealed the existence of the hidden camera, leading to her cries of shock and embarrassment. Initially, I didn't feel angry or overly emotional because I had shed countless tears over the past 2 months. She fell to the floor, prostrating herself and begging at my feet. I asked her how long the affair had been going on, and she confessed that it started 2 months after we moved into the apartment. It had been almost a year since we relocated. Curiosity compelled me to inquire about how it all began. According to her, they met at the park and started chatting. He claimed to be a fitness trainer and had a small gym set up in his apartment. Since she was feeling bored at home, she went upstairs when he invited her, and that's how it all started. These are her words, not mine. It's been over a year since the confrontation, so I'm comparatively calmer now. However, the emotions are still raw, and I continue to feel the pain of my reputation being tarnished by this woman. Even to this day, it feels as though people are looking at me with disdain. There were tears from both of us, and she tried to beg me not to divorce her, saying it would bring disgrace to her and her family. In her presence, I called her parents and shared everything she had done. I was certain that her dad would deal with her before I did, if he got hold of her, because she had disrespected his family too. That's what I admire about the old school guys back home. I told my wife that she couldn't continue living with me in my apartment. I couldn't kick her out right away, especially since her name was on the lease. Plus, she was pregnant, though the paternity of the baby was uncertain. I informed her that she would be sleeping in a different room until I found her another apartment to rent. I agreed to cover the rent for 3 months while she searched for a job, and after that, she would be on her own. Some people might expect me to kick her out immediately, but it's not that simple. I needed her to take care of our daughter until I found a babysitter. I couldn't afford to miss work or lose focus because I had a lot of responsibilities. At that time, I didn't know who the pregnancy belonged to, so it was a complicated situation. 2 days later, I helped her find a new apartment and had her sign the divorce agreement. We didn't want to spend too much on lawyers, so we opted for mediation. We were married for 5 years, and she stayed at home for 4 of those years. She earned significantly less than me when she was working. According to the divorce agreement, I was supposed to pay her alimony for 1.5 years. She couldn't go back to her parents or other family members because she was ashamed of what she had done. Pretty much everyone who knew her also knew the reason for our divorce. As for Hugo, we later discovered that the other woman he was involved with also had a boyfriend, so we shared evidence of their affair with her boyfriend, the co-worker's husband who had kids, and the boyfriend of the other woman who didn't work with Hugo. They all received copies of the proof of their infidelity. We also contacted the HR department and sent them the pictures. We didn't need to remind them that he had violated company policy by sleeping with his subordinates. Fortunately, the company he worked for had a policy against that, and he was eventually fired. I had never really spoken to Hugo before, except for exchanging smiles during the dog walks. But once I was determined, I worked hard and spent a lot of money to ruin his life just as he had ruined mine. He ended up unemployed and had to move out of that apartment. I'm not sure if he knew I was the one behind it all. I'm sure my ex-wife must have told him something. About 6 months after my daughter informed me about her mother and Hugo, my ex-wife gave birth. Even though we weren't living together, I went to the hospital to check if the baby was mine. Hugo is Hispanic, and people from my country have a similar complexion, so the baby could easily pass as mine. We decided to do a paternity test, but the results wouldn't be available until the next day. No one was there for the delivery except me. It was different from when our daughter was born, and the whole village was at the hospital. Everyone had pretty much turned their back on her. Her last months of pregnancy were filled with regret and despair. I was only there because there was a chance the baby could be mine. My ex-wife pleaded for mercy and begged for forgiveness while on the delivery bed, right up until she went into labor. She was relieved to see that I was there. Well, I sent Hugo a letter from the hospital letting him know that he had a baby. And guess what? He never showed up. Months later, my ex-wife told me that he only started showing interest when she put him on child support. Now my ex-wife works full-time and leads a difficult life, earning a wage similar to that of a high school teacher. I don't know if I would call it difficult, but compared to her life before, it's challenging. I have full custody of my daughter. Even though our divorce agreement stated shared custody, I have a full-time babysitter because I don't want my daughter staying at a rundown apartment. I don't want her to experience a difficult life. I earn enough and work too hard for her to live in such conditions. Reflecting on this whole ordeal, It's hard to describe the whirlwind of emotions I went through. Betrayal, heartbreak, anger, and a strange sense of relief that it was all finally out in the open. My ex-wife's actions had left a permanent scar, not just on our relationship, but on how I viewed the world. Trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild. My daughter, on the other hand, was my beacon of hope. Her innocent words had unraveled the entire deception. In the days following the birth of my ex-wife's baby, the paternity test results came in. It was a moment of truth I had been dreading. The test confirmed my worst fears. The baby was not mine. It was Hugo's. The relief I felt at knowing I wouldn't have to be tied to my ex-wife any longer was tempered by the sadness of what could have been. I informed my ex-wife of the paternity test results. She broke down in tears, the reality of her situation hitting her hard. She had not only lost me, but also the respect and support of her family and friends. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. She had made terrible choices, but she was still the mother of my daughter. Life moved on, albeit with a different rhythm. I focused on my daughter, my job, and rebuilding my life. The pain was still there, but it became a dull ache rather than a sharp sting. I started seeing a therapist, which helped immensely. Talking about my feelings and the betrayal I experienced was cathartic. It allowed me to process my emotions and start the healing process. My daughter continued to be my greatest joy. Her innocent questions and comments about the world were a constant reminder of the purity and simplicity of childhood. I wanted to protect that innocence as much as possible. I made sure she knew she was loved and that none of what happened was her fault. We spent as much time together as possible, going on trips to the zoo, playing at the park, and having movie nights. Meanwhile, Hugo's life was falling apart. He had lost his job, and his reputation was in tatters. His ex-wife, the mother of his children, had taken full custody and moved away. He was a shadow of the man he used to be. Part of me felt vindicated seeing him suffer, but another part of me knew that holding on to that anger wouldn't help me move forward. One day, I received an unexpected call from my ex-wife. She sounded different, calmer, more resigned. She apologized again for everything she had done and asked if we could meet to discuss our daughter's future. Reluctantly, I agreed. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop not far from where we used to live. She looked tired, the weight of her mistakes evident on her face. We talked about our daughter, her needs, and how we could co-parent effectively despite everything that had happened. She admitted that she had been seeing a therapist too and was trying to rebuild her life. She wanted to be a better mother and hoped to eventually regain shared custody. I listened, still wary, but willing to give her a chance to prove herself. Our daughter deserved to have a relationship with her mother, and I wanted to ensure that it was a healthy one. We agreed on a gradual plan where she could spend supervised time with our daughter, eventually working up to unsupervised visits if things went well. The journey wasn't easy, but slowly, we began to find a new normal. My ex-wife showed genuine remorse and a desire to change. Our interactions became more civil, and we started to communicate better for the sake of our daughter. Trust was a long way off, but we were making progress. As for Hugo, he remained a distant figure, a reminder of the past. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was struggling to find steady work and was living with a friend. His fall from grace was complete, and he had no one to blame but himself. The scars of betrayal may never fully heal, but they have made me stronger and more cautious. I learned to value myself more, set boundaries, and not ignore red flags. Most importantly, I learned that life goes on, and it's possible to find happiness and peace even after the deepest of wounds. My daughter and I continue to build our lives together, one day at a time, with hope for a brighter future. Months passed, and life settled into a new routine. My ex-wife's visits with our daughter became more frequent, and to my surprise, they went smoothly. She seemed genuinely committed to making things right, not just with me, but more importantly, with our daughter. Despite everything, I couldn't deny her the chance to be a mother to our little girl. My job continued to be demanding, but I found a sense of purpose and stability in it. My colleagues were supportive, and I even made a few close friends who knew about my situation and provided a listening ear when I needed it. Therapy was a game changer. It helped me sort through the tangled mess of emotions and find clarity amidst the chaos. My therapist encouraged me to focus on self-care and personal growth, which I had neglected for so long. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I sat down with my daughter to watch her favorite show. Her laughter filled the room, a sound that never failed to lift my spirits. As we cuddled on the couch, she looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes and asked, "Dada, why doesn't Mama live with us anymore?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been dreading this moment, knowing it would come eventually. Taking a deep breath, I tried to find the right words. "Mama and I are not together anymore because we had some big problems that we couldn't fix, but she loves you very much, and that's why she visits you." She seemed to ponder my answer for a moment before nodding. "I love Mama too, and I love you, Dada." Her simple declaration melted my heart, and I hugged her tightly, fighting back tears. "I love you too, sweetheart, so much." As time went on, I started to feel the itch to move forward with my life. The pain of betrayal had dulled, and the idea of finding happiness again didn't seem so far-fetched. Encouraged by my therapist and friends, I decided to dip my toes back into the dating world. It wasn't easy. Trust issues loomed large, and the thought of getting hurt again was terrifying. But I knew I couldn't let fear control my life. I started small, creating an online dating profile and going on a few casual dates. Some were awkward, some were nice, but none felt quite right. I was honest about my past with the women I met, not wanting to hide anything. One evening, while scrolling through profiles, I came across someone who stood out. Her name was Emily, and something about her profile resonated with me. She was a single mom, had a warm smile, and her profile radiated kindness. After a few days of chatting online, we decided to meet for coffee. I was nervous but hopeful. Emily was even more beautiful in person, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything: our kids, our jobs, and our experiences with heartbreak and healing. There was a connection between us, something I hadn't felt in a long time. We continued to see each other, and slowly, a relationship blossomed. Emily understood the challenges of being a single parent, and her empathy and warmth were exactly what I needed. She met my daughter, and they hit it off immediately. It was like watching two kindred spirits connect. My daughter's happiness was paramount, and seeing her bond with Emily reassured me that I was making the right choice. As things progressed with Emily, I found myself reflecting more on my past. My ex-wife was making strides in her own life. She had found a job, moved into a better apartment, and seemed more grounded. We managed to co-parent effectively, keeping our daughter's best interests at heart. There were still moments of tension and unresolved issues, but the open lines of communication helped. One day, out of the blue, Hugo contacted me. He wanted to meet and talk. I was reluctant but curious. We met at a local park, a neutral ground where our conversation couldn't easily escalate. Hugo looked worn out, the consequences of his actions etched into his face. He started by apologizing. It was a genuine apology, filled with regret and remorse. He admitted to making terrible choices and acknowledged the pain he had caused. "I lost everything because of my actions," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to hear it from me." Listening to him, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a strange sense of pity. I could see that he was a broken man, struggling to piece his life back together. I told him that while I appreciated his apology, it didn't erase the hurt he had caused. "I've moved on," I said. "But the damage you did won't just disappear. I hope you find a way to make better choices moving forward." We parted ways, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Closure, I realized, didn't mean forgetting or forgiving completely. It meant acknowledging the past, learning from it, and moving forward. With Emily by my side, I felt a sense of hope and renewal. We talked about the future, blending our families and creating a life together. She had a son who was a few years older than my daughter, and they got along like siblings. It wasn't always easy. Blending families came with its own set of challenges, but we faced them together. On weekends, we planned outings and activities that brought us closer. Whether it was a trip to the zoo, a hike in the woods, or a simple picnic in the park, we cherished every moment. Our children's laughter was a constant reminder of the joy and love we had found amidst the chaos. Looking back, the journey from betrayal to healing was long and arduous. But it also taught me resilience, the importance of self-worth, and the power of love and forgiveness. I had come a long way from the shattered man who discovered his wife's infidelity. With Emily, my daughter, and our blended family, I found a new purpose and happiness that I once thought impossible. Life is unpredictable and full of ups and downs, but it's also filled with second chances. And this time, I was determined to make the most of it. As the months turned into years, Emily and I grew even closer. Our relationship deepened, and we began to seriously talk about the future. We wanted to create a stable and loving environment for our children, something that we both lacked in our childhoods. The thought of merging our lives completely was both exciting and daunting. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Emily and I sat on the porch, enjoying the quiet night. The stars were bright, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. It was one of those moments where everything felt perfect, and I realized how far I had come from the despair I once felt. "Do you ever think about getting married again?" Emily asked, breaking the comfortable silence. I looked at her, seeing the love and hope in her eyes. "I do," I replied honestly. "With you, I feel like I can trust again. I want to build a future together for us and the kids." She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I feel the same way. You've brought so much joy into my life, and I can't imagine a future without you." It wasn't a formal proposal, but it was a promise. A promise that we would move forward together, hand in hand, facing whatever challenges life threw at us. In the months that followed, we started making concrete plans. We found a house that could accommodate our blended family, with enough space for the kids to have their rooms and a backyard where they could play. Moving in together was a big step, and it wasn't without its hiccups. There were adjustments to be made, and moments of tension as we navigated living under one roof. But the love and commitment we shared helped us overcome the obstacles. Our children adapted quickly, enjoying the new dynamic and the expanded family. One sunny afternoon, while the kids were at school, I took Emily to the place where we had our first date, a quaint little coffee shop that held so many memories. As we sipped our drinks, reminiscing about how far we had come, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Emily," I said, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. "You've brought so much light into my life. I can't imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me?" Her eyes widened in surprise and joy. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded vigorously. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." I slipped the ring onto her finger, feeling a rush of happiness and relief. The coffee shop patrons clapped and cheered, adding to the magic of the moment. We were engaged, ready to start this new chapter of our lives together. Planning the wedding was a whirlwind of excitement. We wanted a simple yet beautiful ceremony, surrounded by our closest family and friends. Our children were thrilled, eagerly participating in the preparations. My daughter would be the flower girl, and Emily's son would be the ring bearer. It was important to us that they felt included in this significant milestone. On the day of the wedding, as I stood at the altar waiting for Emily, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. The heartbreak, the betrayal, and the pain had all led to this moment of pure joy. When Emily walked down the aisle, looking radiant in her dress, my heart swelled with love and gratitude. We exchanged vows, promising to support, love, and cherish each other through all of life's ups and downs. It was a beautiful ceremony, filled with laughter, tears, and heartfelt moments. As we were pronounced husband and wife, I felt a sense of completeness that I hadn't felt in a long time. Life as a married couple brought its own set of challenges, but we faced them together with determination and love. Our blended family thrived, and we made sure to nurture our relationship amidst the chaos of daily life. We set aside time for date nights, weekend getaways, and family vacations, creating memories that would last a lifetime. One particular family vacation stands out in my memory. We decided to take the kids to Disney World, a place filled with magic and wonder. Watching their faces light up with excitement as they met their favorite characters and rode the thrilling attractions was priceless. It was a reminder of the simple joys in life and the importance of family. As the years went by, Emily and I continued to grow both individually and as a couple. We supported each other's dreams and aspirations, celebrating successes and comforting each other during setbacks. The love and respect we shared formed a strong foundation for our marriage. One day, as I was looking through old photo albums, I came across pictures from my first marriage. The memories flooded back, but instead of feeling pain, I felt a sense of closure. The journey had been difficult, but it had led me to where I was meant to be. I realized that every experience, good or bad, had shaped me into the person I had become. Emily walked into the room, noticing the open album. She sat beside me, looking at the pictures with a thoughtful expression. "You've been through so much," she said softly. I nodded, closing the album and placing it aside. "We both have, but it brought us here, and for that, I'm grateful." She smiled, leaning in to kiss me. "Me too." We continued to build our life together, filled with love, laughter, and the occasional challenge. Our children grew, forging their paths, and we couldn't have been prouder of the people they were becoming. Through it all, the bond between Emily and me remained unbreakable, a testament to the strength of our love and commitment. Reflecting on my journey, I realized that life is unpredictable and often takes us through difficult and painful experiences. But it's those very experiences that shape us, teach us resilience, and lead us to where we're meant to be. I had found love again, not just in Emily, but in the life we built together. It was a testament to the power of healing, forgiveness, and the unwavering belief in second chances. No matter what the future holds, I know that with Emily by my side, I can face anything. Together, we will continue to navigate the complexities of life, always finding our way back to each other. Our story, though marked by pain and betrayal, is ultimately one of love, resilience, and the beautiful journey of finding happiness once again. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new adventures and challenges. Our children were growing up fast, each developing their unique personalities and interests. Emily and I made it a point to support them in every way possible, attending their school events, helping with homework, and encouraging their passions. Our family dinners became a cherished tradition, a time for us to reconnect and share stories about our day. Laughter and lively discussions filled the dining room, and I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of contentment. We had created a warm, loving home, and I was grateful for every moment of it. One particularly memorable evening, Emily and I decided to share our story with the kids. They were old enough to understand the complexities of life and relationships, and we wanted them to know that even in the face of adversity, love and resilience can prevail. As we sat around the table, Emily and I took turns recounting the events that led us to each other. My daughter listened intently, her eyes wide with curiosity. "So, Mama had another family before us?" she asked, trying to grasp the concept. "Yes, sweetheart," I replied gently. "I was married before and things didn't work out, but then I met your mama and we found happiness together. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns, but those turns can lead us to where we're meant to be." Emily's son nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like you both went through a lot, but I'm glad you did because it means we're all together now." Emily squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with emotion. "We're stronger because of what we went through," she added. "And we're so grateful to have each other and to have you kids in our lives." The conversation brought us even closer, reinforcing the bonds that held our family together. It was a moment of healing and understanding, a testament to the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. As the years went on, Emily and I faced the typical ups and downs of life: job changes, health scares, and the everyday stresses of raising teenagers. But through it all, we remained steadfast partners, supporting each other and facing every challenge head-on. Our love continued to grow, deepening with each passing year. One summer, we decided to take a family road trip across the country. It was something we had always talked about, and finally, the timing felt right. We packed up the car and set off on an adventure, eager to explore new places and create lasting memories. We visited national parks, historical landmarks, and quirky roadside attractions. The kids marveled at the grandeur of the Grand Canyon, the geysers of Yellowstone, and the bustling streets of New York City. Every stop was a new experience, filled with laughter, wonder, and the occasional mishap that only added to the fun. One evening, while camping under the stars, Emily and I sat by the campfire, watching the flames dance and listening to the sounds of the night. The kids were in their tents, exhausted from a day of hiking and exploring. It was a peaceful moment, a rare pause in the whirlwind of daily life. "I'm so glad we did this," Emily said softly, leaning her head on my shoulder. "These moments are what life is all about." I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. I couldn't agree more. I wouldn't trade this for anything. The road trip brought us even closer as a family. It was a reminder of the beauty of the journey, the importance of making time for each other, and the joy of discovering new things together. When we returned home, we felt recharged and more connected than ever. Years later, as our children grew into young adults and began to forge their paths, Emily and I found ourselves reflecting on the incredible journey we had shared. We had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and immense challenges, but we had also found love, joy, and a deep sense of fulfillment. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me with a smile. "Do you remember that night we talked about getting married again?" I nodded, remembering it vividly. "Of course I do. It was the start of a beautiful chapter in our lives." She took my hand, her eyes filled with love. "I'm so grateful for every moment we've had together. We've built something truly special." I kissed her hand, feeling a swell of emotion. "We have, haven't we? And the best part is, it's not over yet. There's so much more to look forward to." As we sat there, basking in the warmth of the setting sun and the comfort of each other's presence, I realized just how far we had come. Our journey had been filled with twists and turns, but it had led us to a place of deep, abiding love. Life continued to unfold in its unpredictable way, but I knew that with Emily by my side, we could face anything. Our story was one of resilience, hope, and the unbreakable bonds of family. And as we looked toward the future, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the incredible life we had built together.